Yeah, so I'm Keshava, and it's really my joy to get to be with you this morning. I was born and raised at Ananda Village and had the great pleasure of being sort of immersed in these teachings from, the moment of conception. And my father would chant to me every night to put me to sleep. And so the Sri Ram Jai Ram melody, which Swamiji wrote, is one of the oldest melodies that I can remember hearing and recognizing. And it was very sweet, actually. My parents never forced this upon us. I have three other siblings. There are four boys in our family. And they never forced this upon us in any way. They never taught us how to pray or forced us in any particular direction. But my mother told me recently that when I was just a small boy, about 3 years old or something, that she would occasionally see me pranam to master's photos as I would walk by them in our house. And that when I was a little boy, she would invite us to pray our good night prayers. And that she said on one occasion she heard us, apparently my older brother, who we shared bunk beds, one of our favorite lines was to say, if you guys are familiar, there's that picture of Yogananda with a little puppy in his pocket, and it's like this tiny little puppy in his jacket pocket. And apparently one of our most oftenly quoted lines was, "Dear Yogananda, we are the little puppy in your pocket." And so it's been a very sweet incarnation in that sense. And I've had the incredible good karma of being around yogis my entire life, and not just teaching me what the official teachings are. They've helped me understand what it is to live a life for God. And so at any rate, it's now my extraordinary pleasure to get to share some of these teachings with anyone who has ears to hear and enough time to foolishly hand over to me to allow me to speak. And I served in the Ananda Los Angeles community for about 8 years, and I was there briefly while Swamiji was still in the body, and got to have a number of satsangs with him there, and which maybe I can share about a little bit today. And then I've been here in Ananda Palo Alto for just over 3 years now, and I worked in the Sangha as one of their teaching staff and administrative helpers for about 2.5 years. And just about 9 months ago, actually, I switched over, and I've been working full-time at our Living Wisdom High School here in Palo Alto, which has been an absolutely wonderful adventure, and one that I never thought I'd find myself in, but has proved to be very inspiring and incredibly meaningful, and ripe with lots of spiritual opportunities for growth, both for myself and for the students, I hope. So at any rate, with that, that's a little bit about me. And again, it's really a pleasure and a joy to get to be with you guys today. So let's actually begin with a little piece of Swamiji's music, as I have a deep affection for Swamiji's music, at being perhaps the strongest and most early channel for me to be able to truly feel the vibration of divinity in my heart. And so I'm going to turn on my original sound here. And this is a simple song from Swamiji's oratorio, and it's called "He Who Clothes the Fields." And this is a song, it's really like a rhetorical question to the audience, to whoever's listening. And I'll just read the lyrics once. He who clothes the fields with lilies, he who feeds the birds of the air, he who floods the hills with sunshine, he whose love all creatures share. Will he not clothe us? Will he not feed us? Are we not like them his own? Fill your chalice at his fountain. Know that you live not alone. Know that you live not alone. And of course, as many of you are probably familiar, this is adapted from that famous verse from the Bible, which is so sweet. So now I'll sing this. And I invite you, if you know the song, please, behind a muted Zoom meeting, just go ahead and sing with me. And if you don't know it, just relax in the heart and try to feel the melody and the message of this piece of music. He who clothes the fields with lilies, he who feeds the birds of the air, He who floods the hills with sunshine, he whose love all creatures share. Will he not clothe us? Will he not feed us? Are we not like them his own? Fill your chalice at his fountain. Know that you live not alone. Know that you live not alone. This is, although it's only merely 34 seconds long or something, this is actually one of my favorite pieces from the entire oratorio. And I have had the pleasure now of conducting the oratorio in its entirety once. But I have to say that if I could imbue in the audience a single passage, a single moment from the oratorio to remember, there could be so many ones to recall. But I think this might be one of the more valuable moments, to really know that you live not alone. And this is an important distinction that the song is actually making, and the difference between knowing in your heart and just thinking it, or being intellectually exposed to the idea that something is real. But what this song is really inviting us to is an experience of faith, which is what our reading today was discussing, the difference between a law or an outward expression of truth, or rather the directional appreciation of truth, versus the deep inner experience of that truth. And that's what this song is inviting us towards, to look around us and to see the reality of nature and all of God's creation, and to extrapolate from that the deep inner knowing that we live not alone, and that God will feed us, will clothe us, will care for us, will tend to every need that we have. As Swamiji beautifully writes in another one of his melodies, as Christ is talking to a devotee, Christ says, "Those with pure hearts, their needs I attend." And so what this topic is, I think, in this week's reading, really inviting us to explore, is how to commune with God truly, and not to be satisfied with mere definitions or with an outward appearing life of devotion, but to really begin to experience it ourselves. Because laws or rules or any outward conformity will never actually give us what we're looking for. And this makes sense on all levels of creation, that, for example, I used to be an actor, and actually it's now a strange act of cyclical nature. I'm now teaching acting to my high school students, which is something I never thought would happen. But what was very interesting was, as an actor, if you were to play, say, Romeo and Juliet, which I have played, and I'm playing Romeo, and I have to be in love with Juliet, I could say all the most beautiful poetry in the world. I could memorize the text which Shakespeare wrote, which is, I think, without competition, some of the greatest love poetry ever put down to pen. And yet the performance may seem hollow, and yet the audience may be unmoved. And even more, the other actor may not feel that there is a true connection between us. And an audience observing this performance would think, yeah, they're saying nice words, but it means nothing. And often, actually, this is why people don't enjoy watching Shakespeare. Because it's just, to actually quote Shakespeare himself, words signifying nothing. And, or words. And so it's just, it's empty, it's meaningless. And yet, we see when an actor is able to truly engross themselves in the consciousness of the role, to penetrate beyond just the words which the playwright has written, but really to step into the inner experience which would cause those words, then all of a sudden it becomes alive. Then it's no longer just some beautiful expression of poetry, but it is an example of a love perfected. And that's when all of a sudden that story, Romeo and Juliet, really truly touches our hearts. And this is why it has endured for centuries. Because when we are able to tap into the essence of what it's really saying, it's tremendously meaningful. And actually, all of us know in our own hearts that it's possible and that it's true, that we resonate, we experience within ourselves that recognition of what is true. And so the same is that we need to approach our spirituality with the same approach, with the same desire to not just hear the words, to not just hear the rhythm of the poetry, but to actually experience it deeply, and to apply it more literally, to not just practice a technique, to not just say the words of a prayer, but to experience them in our heart. To not just look out and say, God made this whole world and God made me, therefore I must be part of God, but to actually feel that as an indwelling experience. Because once you feel that, or as this song so beautifully stated, once you know that you live not alone, then your life will be changed forever. Because once you have that experience, and it's in you, it will change the way you walk. It will change the way you talk. It will change the way you pray. It will change the way you interact with everyone because you've had that inner experience. And this is why Master emphasized meditation, deep personal communion with the divine so strongly. Because I could pray all the prayers and whispers from eternity and gain nothing. And yet it was that Swamiji said of Master that he couldn't even say the word God without his voice trembling with devotion. And as Sri Yukteswar said, what is the nobler thought than God is? Nay, just God. But how do we bridge the gap between our current complacency and that level of deepest devotion? And herein lies some of the beautiful application of, say, for example, the paths of yoga. Because, of course, the goal of all yoga practice is to unify our heart with the divine. And so obviously Bhakti Yoga, the practice of opening our hearts, of aspiring to a greater consciousness, to allowing God's grace to move through us, that is the noble path. And all techniques and all lessons and all teachings are really just helping us to do that simple task. But let's not also forget that the mind can be useful, the law can be useful, the techniques can be used appropriately in our lives, but that they're not the end. They're merely a tool to accomplish the end. And so we could say that our minds or the law or any given instruction is just like bumper rails in a bowling alley to help us make sure that the bowling ball of our mind and our soul and our hearts gets to the end, but that the bumper rails are not the goal. We're not trying to throw the bowling ball into the rails. We're trying to get down and hit a strike. We're trying to hit the strike at samadhi and God consciousness. But that what the mind can do, actually very akin to those bumper rails, is tell us what not to do. Tell us where not to go. Don't go into the gutter of criticism or of doubt or of the other side of thinking that you're merely this body, or thinking that God will come to you only if you perform the right rites and certain exercises. But what the mind can tell us, as we learned from the practice of Jnana Yoga, is the practice of neti neti, of saying, I am not these things, I am not those things. And the mind can never tell us then what we really are, but that's what the heart can do. That's what we will really understand by stilling the heart, by calming the heart, by praying, by meditating, by listening with a still and open heart. We'll begin to perceive not what we aren't, but we'll begin to perceive what we really are. It was interesting, I started meditating twice daily when I was 16. Just talking about, this reading is also about grace, and it says that Moses brought the law, but Jesus Christ brought grace and truth. And as it happened, I was actually a young theater kid in high school, and I was the lead performing actor in West Side Story, which in a fun circle of events is sort of, as you all probably know, the modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. And at the same time, I was not spending my weekends very appropriately. I was doing a lot of extracurricular activities, we could say, and some rowdy experiences with my friends. And I knew that I was sort of wasting away my prana. And it was particularly important to me because I recognized that I was being a poor example in that production. Because I was playing the lead role, I felt poorly that I wasn't really leading the ensemble. So at any rate, bear with me, this will pertain in about another 30 seconds. And I woke up on New Year's Day after having, been up all night with a lot of my friends, being very loud and rajasic. And I woke up at about 6 a.m. and my New Year's resolution, without any prior meditation, pun intended, was that I wanted to begin meditating twice every day. I have no idea where that thought came from, but I immediately rolled up and I began to practice the Hong Sa technique. And I practiced for just 5 minutes. And then I sat in the silence for 30 seconds and then got up and went about my day. But then again, that evening, I sat down again and I practiced Hong Sa for 5 minutes. And then I went to bed. And I haven't missed a meditation since that day, actually. But what was very interesting was as I began to meditate, something extraordinary began to happen, which was that suddenly I became happier. I became more joyful. I became more creative. I became kinder. I was more loving. I was more gracious. My mind was sharper. I was a better performer. And all of a sudden, like there was this renaissance of everything that I loved in myself. Fast forward, I concluded the production, and when I finished, my old carousing buddies asked me if I wanted to slip back into that lifestyle, and I very distinctly remember the phone call I had with them when I said no. Because I realized that the person I was becoming was who I always wanted to be. And more than that, it was the person who I always felt I was, but couldn't quite find. And later then, when they asked me, Keshava, why do you meditate? I struggled for a moment to be able to express why, because I thought to myself, how can I possibly explain what I have gained from meditation? And I can take that a step further and say, how can I express what I have gained through discipleship, through the practice of Kriya? And one might be tempted at first to say, I've gained peace, or I've gained a calmer mind, or I've gotten rid of anxiety, to try and categorize and analyze and quantify. But actually, finally, the answer that erupted from my heart was I said, meditation has given me myself. It's taught me, it's shown me who I really am. And that's what grace and truth means in this reading. That it's only by that inner communion, by truly going inside, that we'll ever discover who and what we really are. And this is the essence of all of our life stories. That though we may wear the garb of men and women and this job and that role and this responsibility, at the heart of every human story is the one question, who am I? For what end was I made? As it so elegantly says in the Festival of Light. And this is that burning question, that one desire that will never leave us alone. And it is the one thing that the only answer that we'll ever find is within us. And so this reading is an enchanting invitation to remember the importance of our inner life, but that inner life is founded primarily on the love of God. As we read in the second passage from the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna assures the devotee that he says, you don't have to please me to win my love. But he says, know this for certain, thou art dear to me. Cling to me, love me, adore me, and you shall speedily come to me. And so God is simultaneously telling us, don't worry, I'm not going to send you on this esoteric wild goose chase alone. I'm right here, I'm waiting for you already. And every step that you take towards me, I will run 10 towards you. And so I encourage all of us this week perhaps to be not satisfied with mere outward demonstrations of faith. And I don't mean to say that that's at all our normal stance. I think, of course, inner communion is a deep emphasis within Ananda. But all of us, I think, if we're honest, will say that sometimes we'll say a prayer without truly meaning it. Or sometimes we'll name our great masters without the deepest reverence. But let's remember, for example, that immortal statement from Autobiography of a Yogi, that those who utter with sincerity the name of Babaji will attract to themselves an instantaneous spiritual blessing. That's not just the case for Babaji, but also for Lahiri, for Sri Yukteswar, for Christ himself, for Master. And also Swamiji will surely answer you when you pray to him. Try, but try it with the deepest of sincerities. And you know, it's interesting. In the Bible it says, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. And actually less than, I think, even like simply cursing, what that really means, Master said, is that we shouldn't use God's name idly, and that we shouldn't use japa or the Guru's name without true devotion and sincerity. For remember, as Swami Shankaracharya said, it is the greatest blessing in all the three worlds to have a true Satguru. So we should approach that with our reverence, our deepest reverence. And something that I'd like to do is try and take these lofty teachings and these great scriptures and boil them down to something simple that I can really concentrate on, that I can really apply. And so here's my application, my invitation. Try and pray sincerely, very sincerely, this week. Now when you say the names of the masters, say them with all your heart. Even if that means all your heart is saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Dear God, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, dearest friend, my beloved God, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I need you to help me pray. Teach me how to pray. Teach me how to love you. Teach me how to be your son, your daughter, your channel in this world. And you know, if you pray sincerely, God will help you. I often pray to God to teach me how to pray, to teach me how to meditate, because I don't know what I'm doing. To teach me what is wisdom, to teach me what is truth. And lo and behold, slowly but surely, he begins to work his greatest miracle of wisdom and self-realization upon me. You know, it's very interesting. In this reading, Swamiji juxtaposes knowledge with wisdom. And he says that these are two different things. And this is something that I myself have pondered, and it's been very deep and very something I've held very deeply in my own heart for the last decade or so, which is that Master gave the 8 universal aspects of God. And of course, God comes in many ways to many people. Now, you know, as many people, as many hearts there are, that is how many ways God can come, and many, many more. But Master said God also comes in these 8 universal aspects, which everyone can feel, and everyone will feel. And those are peace, wisdom, power, love, calmness, the sound of Om, light, and joy, or bliss. And of these 8, I felt like I had a gentle grasp of some of them. I felt like I had tasted peace, that I knew when peace came into my heart, I knew what it was. I felt that I had experienced divine love. Actually, because of Swamiji's music, I had very strong experiences of Christ's love, very strong experiences of Master's love. I felt that I had experienced power through the energization exercises. I had felt that vivifying force, so powerful it felt almost as if it could tear my body asunder, and yet it didn't, because God is all mercy as well as all power. I felt that I had experienced sound, as I heard, perhaps in glimpses of meditation, the inner sounds of Om. I felt that I had seen light, as God has graced me with some inner experiences of that. But there was one, perhaps, that was more evasive than the others. And that was God as the aspect of wisdom. And I pondered, I ruminated, I investigated, and I thought to myself, what is wisdom? Not the intellectual property of knowledge or of the aggregation of information, or the ability to quote scriptures, but what truly is wisdom? Because wisdom is much more than simply what we put away in the file cabinet of our brain, but is something that resides in our heart. It must be a vibration, I deduced, as every one of these other 8 aspects of God was experienceable and distinct, unique. Like a beautiful dish made by the greatest chef, each one of these aspects had a taste. And I thought to myself, I want to taste wisdom. And I began to pray. I began to pray every day. I took Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. He has a demand for wisdom. It's very simple. And I memorized that prayer, and I prayed it every day, often, many times throughout the day, perhaps hundreds even. And I prayed that every single day for years. And I would ruminate, I would meditate, I would listen to what Master said about wisdom, and I would listen to Swamiji's voice and try and feel behind his voice, behind his words, behind even the ideas. I try to feel for the vibration. What is wisdom? And after years of doing this, tentatively I began to have an experience of that, of what wisdom truly was. And it was very interesting. I was having a conversation with a peer of mine, a friend of mine in Los Angeles, and I was expressing this to him. And I said, after about 6 years of prayer, I think I'm beginning to know what wisdom means, what wisdom is. And his response continues to be a source of delight to me, because he laughed and he said, "Oh, that's easy. Everybody knows what wisdom is." And I blinked at him and I thought to myself, I don't think you know what wisdom is yet. And who's to say? I mean, maybe that's an aspect of divinity which he finds much more accessible than I. But the ease with which he disregarded, and his disposition to try and define wisdom intellectually, made me suspicious of his inner experience of it. Because what wisdom really is, Master said, is the death of all sorrows. Wisdom is the knowing of God's presence and of how to be in tune with God at all times. Wisdom is the ability to know reality as it really is. That is a profound quality. And so we can see through even this small story that it's not enough to just read or to write or to think to gain access to the deeper realities of our own nature, but we have to somehow plumb the depths of the true vibration of God's consciousness. And actually, one such way that we can do this, which I found incredibly helpful, like I mentioned, our Master's prayers, listening to his voice, but also Swamiji's music. I can't emphasize this enough, that Swamiji's music will give you direct experience of deep experiences of God's consciousness. And I was intrigued about a year ago when I picked up the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which is an incredible mystical poetry, and Swamiji's and Master's translation and explanation of that poem is just magnificent. It's deeply inspiring. What was very interesting is this scripture, which it truly is, this profoundly deep scripture, which Master said that Omar Khayyam was a true master, is very deep and very esoteric. He talks about very profound states of consciousness. It's that, one may read, for example, I'll read you one of the quatrains. He says, "And when thyself with shining foot shall pass among the guests, stars scattered on the grass, and in thy joyous errand reach the spot where I made one turn down an empty glass." And he's talking about samadhi. This is the final quatrain of his entire Rubaiyat. And he's saying, "Oh soul, when you follow me into samadhi bliss, when you reach that spot where you finally can dissolve into Om, turn down the empty glass of your own ego and celebrate that you are now infinite." And we can read that quatrain and think to ourselves, what elegant poetry. What a wonderful exalted state. I'm going to go have a cup of coffee. And we need to penetrate it somehow. And that's really what Swamiji gave us through the music. That interestingly enough, one of my favorite melodies which he ever wrote is called Omar Khayyam, and or rather I Omar. And he said that we should listen to that melody while studying the scripture of the Rubaiyat, and that the melody would help reveal to us its inner meaning. And I did that for some time. I would listen to this melody which Swamiji wrote, and then I would read these quatrains and I would meditate on them and I would sing them. And I began to have an inner experience of some of them, and the ecstasy, the joy of that samadhi state which he describes began to sprinkle itself perhaps over my consciousness. And so I'd like to actually close by singing you a selection of the quatrains from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And I encourage you to try and enter into a state of experience with me. I'll sing about 6 of them. And as I do, oh, actually, I'll do this with my other instrument. See if you can go beyond just the words to the inner experience. See if you can imagine that these words and these melodies are not something external which you are enjoying outwardly, but is actually your own spontaneous inner experience. And even if you've never heard this poetry before, and even if you don't understand what it means, just allow its vibration to move over you and see if through this you can have an inner experience of what Omar Khayyam was describing, that true inner state of God consciousness. Awake for morning in the bowl of night, has flung the stone which puts the stars to flight. And lo, the hunter of the east has caught the Sultan's turret in a noose of light. Dreaming when dawn's left hand was in the sky, I heard a voice within the tavern cry, awake, my little ones, and fill the cup, before life's liquor in thy cup be dry. The worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little, hour too is gone. Up from earth's center through the 7th gate, I rose and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many knots unraveled by the road, but not the knot of human death and fate. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. Ah, moon of my delight, who knowest no wane, the moon of heaven is rising once again. How oft hereafter rising shall she look through this same garden after me in And when thyself with shining foot shall pass among the guests of stars scattered on the grass, and in thy joyous errand reach the spot where I made one turn down an empty glass. Let's sit together and meditate for just a few moments, trying to feel inwardly in our own hearts for the deathless vibration of God's consciousness. That indwelling wisdom, our soul's ability to know God. Oh, peace. Amen. Thank you, friends, for having me. It's been such a joy to get to spend the time together, and I look forward to when I can come in person. Yes, as you say, Maitri.
So thank you, Keshava, so much. First, I'm going to make a comment, but first I want to let everyone online know that we have come off of Facebook now, just now. So, oh, I forgot to tell the Facebook people. It's okay, too late, that they can come in through our website to continue satsang with us. So, but I wanted to say that beautiful, the melody. And I don't even know if anyone, probably Eric, Linda, remember, Mark and Maitri, if they're here, that we used to sing a quatrain at every Sunday service.
Mm, yeah,
Swamiji was doing that. I don't remember for how long. It was when our center was in Farmers Branch, Texas.
yeah,
And because I was the guitarist and I was doing the bum bum bum
yeah.
bum, I wasn't singing it. But it was all, even though I didn't really understand and I haven't studied the Rubaiyat, but the vibration always touched
Yeah,
my heart, just like right now. And so I think that's very, very important. Those who want to study it, super, you'll probably get a lot more out of it. But I just enjoy the vibrational, the love story of the devotee and God,
true.
as that was said. So thank you for
Mm,
offering that just now.
yes.
Yeah, and that personal relationship with Guru for me with Yogananda is so very important. Impersonal, yes, as well. I understand that, but to meditate or to just sit in the evening, close my eyes and have him, Yogananda, or sometimes Babaji, or sometimes Jesus, right there, like I'm talking to my friend, or just being with a friend without even talking. That's so important, and I guess that's the nature of my bhakti
Mm,
yoga, which comes more natural to me.
beautiful.
So let's open this up now. People, open your cameras again. I know some people can't, but they don't have that capability. But if you can, go ahead and do that and speak directly to Keshava now. Open your mics and comment, questions.
Linda, I see you've put a question in the chat box, and I'll just answer that first. Which is, yes, I do Vedic astrology readings, but I've had to take a hiatus from them at the time, for the time being, just because of the intensity of the new responsibility at the high school, as well as continuing some of my work with the Sangha. I find myself very, very much stretched out. And so I have, for the time being, tentatively said that I will put the side readings for the time being, but hopefully resume them a few over the summer months. So if you'd like to reach out to me in June, say, perhaps we'd be able to find a time.
Okay, what's the best way to do that, to contact you? Because the emails that Tasha suggested didn't really seem to work.
That might not be your fault. I've been very bad at being able to keep up with my emails. So
No, I mean not work in the sense that I got a message back saying I wasn't allowed to or authorized to, or something odd. It wasn't like a non-response. It was a weird response.
I see. Well, I've just put one of my email addresses into the chat, and that will
Okay.
certainly reach me. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
Mallory. Hi, Keshava.
Hi.
That last piece that you sang, with your direction, I really, for some reason, couldn't even understand the words very well, but the vibration really touched my heart.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
The words are quite esoteric and are, it's a translation from an old Sufi poem. So the words are kind of hard to follow at first. Like was said before, you sort of have to study them to understand the poetry more. But if you enjoyed it, I would really encourage you pick up that book. I found it to be deeply inspiring.
It's in the Rubaiyat?
Yeah, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, as explained by Master.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Keshava, this is Eric.
Hey.
Hey, it's funny. What some of the best times I've had are listening to the Audible version of the Rubaiyat.
Oh, wow.
Swami, Swami Kriyananda doing the reading, singing it and then explaining it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I sit in my zero gravity chair in the early morning and just enjoy that vibration for a long time.
Oh, that's
And I'm
magnificent.
glad you reminded me of it because it's been a while since I've listened to it.
Uh-huh.
I will.
Very good. Very, very nice.
Yeah. So just know that I think Mark and Maitri had to go hop in the car to drive to Sunday service at Ananda Village, is why they are no longer on.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know they were there.
they're actually at the
Oh,
meditation.
for Inner Renewal Week. I see.
Yes, they're at
Got
the
it.
meditation retreat, and at the very start of service, for those who were on, they were both online and waving, and we kind of said hi. But yes, they just arrived there last night and are staying the entire week. The Kriyavan initiation on Friday. Then Mark comes home. Maitri's staying for an extra week to take some seclusion days. So that's why they're not here with us. But any questions for Keshava? Let's put him on the spot.
Yes.
Well, I have another question.
Good.
Okay.
I was listening to your speech when Asha was here. I was listening to it this morning because Maitri put it on there to listen to. And I didn't hear it because I couldn't come to that part of the retreat. And I want to listen to the end of it. But this is such a basic question, but why choose Ayurvedic over Western astrology? Because my mother always, she opened my eyes to astrology, but it was Western. So why choose the Ayurvedic?
That's not actually a really basic question, but I've had hour-and-a-half long conversations about this and only this with my mentor, Drupada. So don't feel like that's a silly question at all, but it's actually, we could talk a long time about that. But in the short of it, what's interesting is actually when Western astrology was originated in Greek culture, what many people don't actually realize is a lot of Greek culture came from India.
Okay.
And like even the pantheon, the Greek pantheon is almost a direct translation from the Hindu pantheon, just they changed the names. and change some of the creation myths in its garb. But a lot of the Greek spirituality is very similar to Hinduism. And so not very many people know that. But what's interesting is the Greeks took astrology from India. And at the time, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but at the time, the Greeks and the Vedic astrologers were calculating the night sky the same way. And that they were calculating that the first day of spring was roughly when the sun was moving into Aries. And so the Greeks said, okay, great, first day of spring is first day of Aries, and then we'll just carve the year into 12 equal parts, and we'll call each of those 12 equal parts the different constellations, and we're done, we're happy. And so, but then what's been interesting is because of the elliptical orbit of the Earth and other things over the last 2,000 years, the way of calculating what is the first day of Aries has changed. And that if the Western astrologers still say that the first day of Aries, the way they calculate the night sky is based on the solar progression. And so they say the first day of spring is the first day of Aries, and that Aries then lasts about 30 days or 29. And then they basically cut the year into parts based on the equinoxes and the solstices. And then they divide the night sky's constellation mathematically. Now, where that gets different from Vedic astrology is actually the perceivable zodiac. And so in Vedic astrology, they would say the first day of spring and when the sun in Aries don't necessarily coincide. And that what we would actually do to discover when the sun is in Aries is like, look at the sky and just ask, where's the sun? Or where is Jupiter? And so, for example, when I have a software that calculates all of this much more accurately than I can, but sometimes I'll just look outside if I haven't been keeping up with my software recently, and I'll see the constellation Pisces, and I'll see Jupiter, and I'll see like, okay, Jupiter is clearly in Pisces because it's right next to those stars. But by a Western astrologer standard, they would say that Jupiter is actually in Aries, but visibly, perceptibly, it's not. And so that's the primary difference, is just how they calculate the night sky. Now, the implication that has is actually very interesting, and I'll give you a brief summary, but again, this is something that we could talk about ad nausea. But in essence, one could summarize it that Western astrology is more concerned with the face that you bring into society, with your personality, kind of with the garb that you put on. And like if you were going into a job interview and you wanted to make a good impression, like what you're putting out. And it's interesting because Western culture has, of course, become obsessed with appearances and with the external world and what is quantifiable. Whereas Vedic astrology is more concerned with what you are on the inside. And Vedic astrology says, don't show me what you appear to be, show me what causes that. Show me the vibration, the consciousness, the essence which causes you to appear that way. And so the fun thing is, the different approaches would be more or less applicable to different types of people. That if someone were very Western in their thinking and in their thoughts and in the way that they perceive life, they might not get along very well with me in a Vedic reading, because I'd be sitting there talking to them about like, what's the consciousness within you that is manifesting the vibration of energy, which is then drawing to you these circumstances. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I just got to go like be more charismatic and talk my boss into giving me a raise or something. And so it's actually it really depends on the person. And I have had conversations with a few very I could say Western-minded people, even in regards to their spirituality. And they've been absolute terrible readings, because I'm like trying to talk to them about a certain part of their consciousness and they're like not having it. So I would say it's really just is dependent upon the person and dependent, of course, upon the astrologer. Because I think if you found a deeply intuitive astrologer from any tradition, they could probably be very helpful to you. And that's something that I'll close the conversation on this note, is really astrology is like intuition for cripples. Like to really be a good astrologer, really what you're doing is trying to listen to the other person's soul, trying to listen to God's grace, and trying to help them see themselves as they really will be. And it's a highly intuitive art. And it's actually very apropos to the conversation we were having today in the Sunday service. There are rules and there is a science to it, but to really be a truly effective practitioner, it takes a tremendous amount of guidance. And so I would say a very intuitive, very attuned Western astrologer could probably give you a tremendously helpful reading.
Mm.
And a Vedic astrologer who doesn't know what they're doing could say some really funky stuff. And I've got some funny stories of that. I've got some really terrible advice from from a Vedic astrologer who was very materialistic in his bent. I have to tell one part of that story. He told me I should stop serving my guru and I should start like a canned goods business. And I was like, what are you talking about? So, you never know. What I would say is just follow your heart and ask God what is the right thing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've had several readings with Drupada over the years, and it is true. It's the parts that open up the heart, so to speak, when he talks about certain things. He just expands on certain things where one sees an opportunity to move into a good space from something that might be tough.
Yes.
So yeah, it is an intuitive process, and that's the sweetest part of the readings. Is not the kind of dry stuff, obviously. It's the stuff that really makes one stop and perceive and feel.
I completely agree. That's really his gift and his art. And one of the things which he is extraordinary in and almost unique in, his ability to understand the directional development of every planet and every constellation and therefore people is really remarkable.
I'm going to tell a little story on Drupada. He wouldn't mind this, I'm sure, but way back in Farmers Branch, Texas, so we're going way back 25 years or so. That's the only reading I've had. We brought him to Texas and definitely had him filled up every day that he was here, right, to give readings. And so this is my first experience, right? And I don't know him and he doesn't know me. I've only been on the path maybe 3 years or so. Anyway, long story short, he told me, so in the chart, which he sort of explained to me, he said, you're going to be going public. And I said, oh, no. You don't know me. My response, you don't know me, Drupada. I'm really behind the scenes. Yeah, I play guitar over here, but I'm behind the scenes. I'm new on this path. And, well, all I know is, he kept saying, is that I'm seeing from the chart and my intuition is that you're going public. Well, 3 years later, our ministers left. And the next thing I know, for me, it was public.
Yeah.
We're still, on a scale of Ananda worldwide, we're a humble, beautiful, wonderful group of devotees here. But for me, it was going public to suddenly be giving Sunday service. And Eric was certainly in that group back then. Linda, you were there. Anyway, and here we are 25 years later from that reading when he told me I was going public and I resisted. And Master said, well, hello, you guys are going public. So here we are.
Here we are.
Thank you, Keshava, so much for sharing with us and your beautiful energy and the music, of course, the vibration of all of that is always appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, friends. It's really a treat. I look forward to when I can come visit you in person again.
We welcome that. If you ever feel that in your consciousness, you ask, because we already are welcoming you back. And this year's pretty full. We have our Kriya initiation coming up, well, in the fall, but we also have Sagar coming in about a month. And if you like really hot weather, summer's good for us.
All right.
And if not, if you want to come in the winter, then it would be next year, and we welcome that.
All right. Noted.
So anybody else want a last minute hi bye to Keshava? Open mics if you want to say something. Thank you so much.
All right.
Well, are we going to fit? We have our Texas goodbye. Shall we do it? Go ahead, open your mics. And together we say, Namaste.
Namaste, y'all.
Namaste.